welcome to ShakeTube episode 7. I'm offering up some quick thoughts today because I have some Edgar Allan Poe to read. If you all don't know what I'm talking about, I have a couple videos from the last week that details my October reading project, so check that out. But in the meantime, I'm going to be talking about a surprisingly great comedy, and that is Much Ado About Nothing. I wasn't sure what to expect at the beginning of this thing, and I had some trouble starting. I don't know if that had to do with the fact that this was written in more of a prose style as opposed to the verse style that's found in the majority of Shakespeare's plays, but it definitely felt a little weird, and maybe that got me out of my groove, and I had to do a little looking online to find some easier translations. So I don't know if that was just me that had trouble starting, and it might have to do with the fact that I've had to restart these plays over and over and over. And so maybe that has to do with it as well. But once I got into it, I could just tell that this play was gaining momentum as it was going along. There were just a lot of these small wins over and over and over that allowed it to really blossom into something that was truly great. I don't know if I can even call it cliche because I don't know how often a lot of these tropes of today appeared during this time, but it was just stuff like the masquerade ball where you know what's going to happen because you've read it in so many stories before, where people don't know who they're actually talking to, but that scene landed here. It might not have been the greatest scene ever, but it was something that was humorous. You got to see these different interactions between a lot of the characters, and then it moved on to other great scenes, and it just felt like over and over and over, they just kept having these jokes that were landing or these scenes that were just pretty smooth, and I never felt like anything detracted too much from the end goal. The other thing that I felt allowed it to gain that momentum is because I had already had some experience with some of the other plays and already had in my mind a lot of these scenes that didn't work as well in the previous plays. Those same types of scenes were again looked at here, but I thought that they were done a lot better. So for a few examples, they had a witty female like in The Taming of the Shrew, but as opposed to that story where they were looking to change that character, here with Beatrice, everybody said that, yeah, maybe her wits would make it harder for her to find a husband, but nobody ever felt like they were trying to change that. And overall, it was more along the lines of they didn't really need to change her, but they needed to find somebody that could match that wit. They had relationship trickery like they did in A Midsummer Night's Dream, but as opposed to that play where in that video I mentioned I didn't feel like those tricks ended up leading to a satisfying conclusion, those pairings in that case were just brought on by magic, and when you get to the end, the magic hadn't worn off, and so you don't know if all of the characters were truly going to be happy underneath all of that magical messing around that was going on. But here, when you get to the end, even though Beatrice and Benedict were tricked into professing their love to one another, you felt like they were a better match because they did have these sharp wits, and even though they were arguing a lot in the beginning, you could tell that once they had learned that the other might actually have feelings for them, they realized that they could have actually been a good pair. And it was great even at the end when they were truly going to get together and have that marriage like everybody was trying to push them towards. When Benedict asks Beatrice, "Do you love me?" she says no, and they start joking about it even more in that moment. And so you could just tell that that marriage was going to be really fun. They matched each other quite well, and the trickery didn't feel like it was something that forced anything. It just kind of led them into a place that was probably better for both of them in the end. And so as opposed to A Midsummer Night's Dream where it wasn't as satisfying, here it really was. There was the fake death like there was in Romeo and Juliet, but as I mentioned in that video, there were certain instances where the circumstances around that fake death were done okay in that instance, but then it led to Romeo getting there, and because of some random event that allowed him to not get in on this plan to have Juliet fake her death and have them escape together, he doesn't know that and kills himself, and it didn't feel like something that was well thought out. It was just like, we need to rush ourselves to these conclusions. But in here, with Hero, where she had to fake her death, it was just to figure out what was going on. There was a lie going around, and they needed her to kind of stay off the scene as they figured it out. And then when she does come back into it and they reveal that she's been alive the whole time, everything's okay again. It just felt like that plot device was just utilized a lot better here. And so, again, you get to a point where there's the same type of scene brought in, but it just felt like it was better suited for this story. Even the comic relief felt like it was a step up from previous plays. Like, you had, even in the tragedies, certain scenes where they just wanted to have quick laughs, but in here with the lovable lugs, Dogberry and Vergis, their scenes really added a lot to the play as a whole, and they also had a lot of recurring jokes that made them seem like they were more than just this cheap, easy laugh. Like with Dogberry, he at first got called an ass by one of the two criminals that he apprehended. He wanted to make it clear that that needed to be part of the accusation to those guys. But then when he tries to phrase it to other people, sometimes he just, instead of saying, remember that this guy called me an ass, he was just like, and remember, I'm an ass. And so it was just something that kept coming back over and over and over. And of course, with their inability to phrase their sentences correctly, their insertion of words that had the very opposite meaning of what they were going for, it just felt like the comic relief was just more prevalent here and done a lot better. This play really could come across as fluff. Like, that would totally be understandable because it is an easy story to get into with everybody reacting to these crazy rumors that are going around and seeing how they respond to everybody else's responses until it spirals out of control. But you could also read it a lot deeper with a lot of the symbolism that's in here. It gives it that extra depth that elevates it from just being a fluffy comedy into something that could be studied. And I won't get into anything too crazy, but there is the recurring theme with infidelity, and all of the male characters in here are trying to really make it clear that they have this fear that all of the females in their lives will be unfaithful to them. And there's always this recurring imagery of the horns of the cuckold, where they're just trying to get this point across that this is something that really plays into their everyday lives and how they go about this process of trying to find a mate. But then you even get later on, and Balthazar, one of the characters, sings a song that shows that it might be the other way around. And so it adds that depth into what is the true message here. Is it just infidelity as a whole? Is it trying to add some balancing to the gender roles of the time? I thought that that allowed the play to really carry a more progressive message, and I appreciated that because in some of the other plays that wasn't quite there. This play just felt more refined all around, and though it didn't really have any scenes that necessarily topped any of Shakespeare's most memorable scenes of all time, it just stayed consistent and had a lot of consistently good scenes to end up bringing about this great play overall. It was a nice, truly comedic experience that has definitely allowed Much Ado About Nothing to make it into my top tier so far. And that's it. I have to go do some more reading a couple centuries into the future, but what did you think about Much Ado About Nothing? Did you like it like I did? Did you find some problems with it? I am curious because there have been multiple instances during this ShakeTube read-along that there have been some huge differing opinions, and so I don't know if people are going to read into this the same way that I did, but I really, really liked it, and I hope you did too, but let me know in the comments below. Next time I'll be seeing you all will be the 10th for Octedgar Allan Poe, and then after that we will be reading Richard II, and that will go up next Friday, and I will look forward to seeing you all for both of those videos. Thanks for watching. See you next week.